welcome back to Storytime with David. Today, I think I'm going to read one of my own books today. Let's see, we'll go to Time Is Once More. No, it's not. So we're going to read from Time Is Once More, and this is one of those times. This is with the Guild of Travelers, the younger generation. And what happened was at the time, Donald got himself in trouble. So he was taken out of the leadership position and Zeke took over. And so he's kind of like got to be their guardian angel. And that's where we're starting from. So Zeke in command. And there's a quote on here by Warren Bennis. The most dangerous leadership myth is that leaders are born, that there is a genetic factor to leadership. That's nonsense. In fact, the opposite is true. Leaders are made rather than born. And the story starts now. It was the next meeting of the Guild of Travelers. All members were present. They sat around talking and snacking, waiting for the meeting to begin. Donald and Zeke had been quietly talking in the back by the window. When they separated, Donald sat at the table to the side, and Zeke sat at the head. First things first, would everyone rise and welcome our newest member, Dale McDonald? Everyone applauded, and Dale flushed with embarrassment. Zeke continued, I have been allowed to lead this particular trip. It has been requested by Lon that we attend a famous event. The field of cloth and gold has been chosen. This event was a celebration between Henry VIII, King of France, King of England, and Francis I, King of France. We will be there as guests with Don and Honey as the main attendees. We will accompany them and will be able to participate in the events. She paused and looked over to Don and Honey at the back. Since this is our first trip on the ground, please stay together with your partner and don't wander off from each other. Dale and Lorna, Lon with me. Lon threw her mock salute. Ma'am, yes, ma'am. She went on. We will do hourly checks with the base and notify Donald of our location. Donald will have eyes on all of us at the same time. All monitors will be activated, and a viewer will be set to follow each of us. On the table are bags of coins for each of you. Please get your clothes. Use outfits from the 1500s, French or English will do, and ensure that they are of high status. Your acquaintances of a noble knight and who is a friend of the King of France and his lady. You must be dressed accordingly. Men will wear swords, and all females will have a hidden blade accessible. Please get your clothing and reassemble in 1 hour. As they were talking, Don and Honey were setting up the horses and using the handheld reader to check all the remotes. They passed out the initial remote to be worn on the shoulder next to the skin. The other remote was a wrist style and was in case of emergency or as backup in case one got broken. Since Donald's trip, this had become a new rule, and everyone agreed with it. As people found out of the clothing storage unit, they gathered swords or knives. Over time, the guild had been in existence. It was a rule that no weapons were to be taken on trips. This rule had been modified when wearing of weapons was in accordance with the standards for the time periods they were visiting. The rule was that if attacked or in peril, you would defend and disarm but not kill. All members had become skilled in different styles of fighting based on abilities and temperament. Surprisingly, Lon was the most skilled. Being naturally of a sedentary disposition, he used minimal effort with maximum results. Using small movements allowed him to move quickly, and he was usually master of the situation in moments. Lorna was the most aggressive, and her strength and agility were her strong suit. Zeke used strength and flexibility to strike and maneuver out of harm's way at the same time. Don was combining as many styles as he could master, so that his was a confusing style of combat. Ever since his jousting encounter, he was more controlled than before and had learned to read an opponent by their subtle shifts in body language. Individually, each was formidable, but together, they were a force to be reckoned with. Don and Honey were last to change and merge resplendent. They were wearing clothes from their honeymoon trip, changed with the addition of silver lace and gold piping. Don was wearing a new sword he had created especially for this trip as soon as Honey realized he would need to come. He was known to the king and would wear the ring he had given him to remind him of the debt he owed Don. Donald would be holding down the fort alone. Don pulled his son aside and placed the load key in his hand. Look, son, this load key will give you full access again. It is to be used only in emergency. You'd be no use to us without it, so I made it just in case. I'm trusting you to not use it unless there is an emergency. Once we are gone, get into the appropriate clothing just in case you need to do an emergency run-through. Don looked at his father quizzically. Dad, you act like you already know I'm going to need this. I mean, we've never gotten into costume on watch. Don looked at his son seriously. Donald, we're going to a place that has people with knives, swords, and alcohol flowing freely. I never read anything saying there were free-for-alls, but I don't want to take any chances with the people we're bringing. Just keep an eye out, especially on Zeke. She's the most trusting of all of us, as she's lived secluded in the village. Donald and Don rejoined the group. Zeke turned to Donald. Donald, would you please do a final check on all returns? Donald had everyone hit the 2 top buttons on the returns and check the board. Board shows all green. Zeke activated the main control panel and set it for 10 miles away from the meeting place. She activated the portal to exit from the barn. In a booming excitement, her voice quavered as she asked everyone to mount up in the barn. She was the last to leave the lab only so she could kiss Donald in private. Donald was glad the kiss was private. When they parted, his face was flushed. She ran out to the barn to join the others. Donald did a quick look around and gave out an all clear. The guild members leapt out of the portal at full gallop. Donald laughed at the fact that any time anyone left through the barn, they emerged like Batman coming out of the Batcave. Once upon the road, they made their way to the festivities, leaving Donald alone, reminiscing on the excellent quality of Zeke's kisses. As the party made their way to the event, Zeke looked back to see everyone riding in pairs. Dale and Lorna together, Don and Honey and she were leading with Lon. Over her earpiece, she heard Donald. Zeke, I did a little more research and found out some things we might want to change. Zeke nodded. Okay, what do you have in mind? Donald straightened his notes. Can I have your permission to open up this to everyone? Zeke got a kick out of Donald asking her permission. She sat up straighter, and it made her realize she really was in charge. Go ahead. She raised her hand and pointed to the side of the road. They gathered together out of the way of traffic. Hi, folks. I just want to input some information. First, today is June 11th, your time. He assumed a radio broadcaster voice. The weather forecast is clear with a chance of clouds and a 20% chance of rain towards evening. We're looking at a cool day in the high 60s, so you may want to keep those sweaters handy. He resumed his normal voice. It's going to be a huge day for jousting. On other days, there will be wrestling and sword fighting. We set this up to be there one day originally, but I was thinking it might be possible to link the portal through the viewer as Wolf did, and you can walk through to different days and partake of all the events. Everyone agreed that it was a fantastic plan. All right, Donald, let's start on today's jousting, and you can work out a schedule of events after, say, 4 hours. Donald switched to another screen for an overhead view and started making notes. I'm on it, boss. Honey was impressed at how Zeke was changing by being in control of the team. She was becoming self-assured. Her voice was firmer, and Honey smiled with an almost motherly affection for her. Zeke turned her horse and they headed back towards the field. Donald had to pull the viewer far back to take in the vast expanse of the event. Multicolored tents were everywhere, enormous, large, and small, and used for everything conceivable from sleeping to dining. Curious, Donald focused on the large castle that was in an unusual place. It was a full-size castle, and from the looks of things, belonged to Henry VIII. He zoomed in to see that all was not as it appeared. The bottom half was solid, even to stained glass windows. The top was painted canvas, but was done so well as indistinguishable from the real walls. He glanced at the main screen and started to guide the team to the primary jousting section. As they passed a French-style castle on the left, Henry and Francis rode out, heading for the jousting field. Francis saluted Don and company and waved for him to accompany them. Claude rode up to Honey. You ladies are welcome to join our party while the men beat their brains out. Honey shrugged and looked at Zeke for permission, much to Don's amusement, so he did as well. Zeke blushed, nodded assent, and the men headed to the jousting field and the women to another tent. Don, along with Lorna and Dale, rode behind the king, King Francis, that is, with the rest of his court. After someone noticed the king's ring on Don's hand, they treated him with civility and respect. More than once, the king had spoken of how Don and Frank had traveled to rescue his sons, and that he had given Don one of his rings in token of a pledge. Donald felt it would be at least a half-hour wait as they made their way to the field. He made a pot of coffee and rummaged around for something to snack on. Arriving back at the screen, he saw the male component of the team in the stands waiting. He set up another screen that was focused on the ladies. They had gone to a large tent that was completely filled. Along the walls were tables of food and on other side tables of drink, with 2 fountains of different wines at each side. The 2 queens were seated together with the rest of the company seated on the carpeted floor or on low stools. Honey and Zeke were at a table and helping themselves to pheasant and wine. Lorna was near the exit and sipping on a blue-green liqueur. He glanced back at the jousting tournament to see that the field, which was the size of a football field, was divided in 2. On one half, the French king challenged all English knights, while on the other it was the English against the French. As the kings made ready for combat, Donald looked into the stands and sought out Don and company. He found them standing almost at midpoint and cheering enthusiastically. Don was munching on a leg of mutton and waving it over his head as he yelled encouragement. He looked around, Don, and in the stands, Dale was missing. He called to Don to see if Lon had said where he was headed. The reply was a negative. He checked on the ladies and noticed that Lorna was no longer with the company. It didn't take a genius to tell what was happening. He turned on 2 extra viewers and locked the units onto their remotes. He homed in on each of them. He is now trying to monitor 5 viewers. Dale and Lorna were moving towards each other. Donald zoomed out from Dale's location and tried to see a likely spot for a rendezvous. To the back of the jousting area were a clump of 8 trees that had shrubbery around. Donald followed Lorna as she walked in the direction of the trees. He brought the viewer out and noticed that she was being followed. He calmly got her attention while looking around for somewhere he could use the duck blind setting. He called to Dale where he would be sending her and have him ready in case the blind failed to work. Okay, Lorna, I want you to take a left turn at the long tent in front of you. It has a joining at the rear with another tent. I want you to go to the corner. I've already set up the duck blind, and once you pass through it, you won't be visible to these idiots. He switched to Dale, who was running at top speed and had one hand on the sword in readiness. Dale, I set up the blind, and Lorna will be hidden at the first corner behind the large tent to your right. It has a shield of a phoenix in front. I see it. Are those the 2 fools who are following her? Dale did a quick glance on the 3 monitors. Yeah, she's hidden, but if they come too close, she'll be visible. It's a blind, not a wall. Lorna was hidden and had her blade out. She was shaking in readiness with her swift defense. Donald extended the viewer back farther and saw with disquiet 2 more headed the same way. The first 2 had backup. Donald flipped the switch for an all-hands call. Donald was with the king and couldn't break free. Lon excused himself and ran furiously over, where Donald guided him. Honey backed out the rear door of the tent, grabbing Zeke as she ran. From the pulled-back view, Donald saw all members converging on Lorna's location. Donald was right to worry that Lorna might become visible. The 2 followers had separated, and one was walking too close. He passed the boundary of the blind and was himself hidden from view from his companion. Dale was seconds away, and Donald let the blind fall since it was of no use anymore. Lorna stood with sword drawn and a look on her face that could have frozen the Thames. Dale ran in just as the blind was dropped and rushed at the back of the one closest to Lorna, pushing him aside into the tent. He swung round with the face on fire and lunged at Dale. Lorna had already engaged the other when Zeke and Honey arrived. They were set to intervene when a rough voice behind them announced that reinforcements had arrived. Honey and Zeke spun around, swords at the ready, and a grand melee began. Zeke was slightly tipsy, but the blood rushing to her head cleared that up pretty quick. Honey, fired by her past adventures, waded in with a vengeance. Down at the palace, ready to intervene, when Zeke ordered him to remain and keep an eye peeled for any other arrivals. Donald moved the viewer further out and saw Don running hard. Lorna was skillfully maneuvering her opponent and wearing him out. Don had his opponent pinned to the wall and wasn't giving any room for him to escape. Honey and her opponent were almost dancing as they spun around. Zeke was not a seasoned fighter, but was skillfully parrying her opponent's blade and working to shorten the distance between them. It made for an awkward fighting style for her opponent, who was much taller and continually tried to reverse way to gain some distance. Don swung into view just as two more arrived to assist their mates. Don strode up to them, roaring like a bear and looking twice as angry. With wide, sweeping slashes, he engaged them both at once. Donald, at the viewer, watched as a ring of onlookers formed surrounding the fighting and preventing Donald an opportunity to go through and assist. Lorna made quick work of maneuvering her opponent out of the corner. She forced him backwards towards the crowd, who were waving her towards them. As she backed him to the waiting arms, he was lifted up, his sword removed, and he was passed overhead to the back where he was thrown clear. Lorna joined Lon, and the two guided their opponent to the crowd on the other side. With many cheers, he too was lifted up overhead, stripped of his weapon, and was sent sailing outside the ring. Don let the others know drive the remaining ones to the waiting crowd, who were beckoning and laughing for another person to throw. The remaining four were carefully guided to the waving hands, who were cheering and yelling for more. Each opponent was, as he was brought to the crowd, was scooped up and tossed. Except the last one. This one was being guided by Zeke, and she had maneuvered him to one side. He was picked up and, being slight of frame, was tossed to the center of the crowd. For the next 5 minutes, he was passed, thrown, and hurled over the cheering heads of the crowd while he cursed. It didn't take long for a particularly vigorous throw to land him face first in the dirt. Stunned, he looked around for his friends, and not seeing them, made his way to be lost in the vast stretch of people. Don and Honey checked everyone, not a scratch among the lot. Don was cheering and working on setting another viewer to go back and record the fight. Zeke led everyone out as the crowd parted to let them through, cheering them on their way. Dale and Lorna apologized, since it was their actions that caused the fight in the first place. They found a semi-quiet spot and gathered. Zeke looked at Dale and Lorna. "I'm tempted to send you both back." Dale and Lorna looked so apologetic and beseechingly at Zeke that she relented and allowed them to stay. But they were warned that another transgression would mean instant return. The two groups separated to return to the Queen's tent and the jousting field. Don sat back and tried to resume normal breathing. Okay, this is a long chapter, so we're going to stop there. I'm going to mark it. And we will do the next part on my next reading. Sorry about this, but I'm doing some canning and I got stuff going, so we'll have to pause here. And I tell you something, I'm running out of things to read from other people. I've got plenty of my own books, and that's fine, but I'd kind of like to continue to do some other authors' work. So if you are an author or you know of an author that wouldn't mind having their books read, all I ask is that you send me the book. And that way I'll put it out here, I'll put it on my list. And I do sometimes do reviews of them and put them on my site and also on Amazon. So you're getting quite a bit for nothing. So that's all I've got for today, and I hope to see you again on my next reading. So thank you again for visiting, and have a good day. Bye.